Hi everyone, it's Abby Amiot here with Dr. John Bell from Wellshire Presbyterian Church in Denver, Colorado, and this is Tabletop Theology, a lighthearted conversation about serious topics. Hi John, how are you?
Good morning, Abby. How are you?
I'm good.
Did you enjoy the debate last night?
It was something, wasn't it?
Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, exactly. We are going to talk about a pretty serious thing today. We talk about tabletop being a lighthearted conversation about serious topics. This one is probably the most serious we've gotten into in the sense of it's pretty emotionally charged. I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners are going to have different opinions than we do. That's great. But we're going to talk about life in general, getting into a little bit on abortion today from a theological perspective more than political. We really don't want to try to tell people how to vote or anything like that. I think I at least can express my own opinions about that, but we'll try to definitely keep this from a biblical and theological denominational standpoint.
Good.
So really, I think this concept of life in general, and there's a lot in the Bible about life. I think usually the passage when it comes to abortion that Christians turn to is the Psalms of I knit you together in your mother's womb. So John, can you just kind of give us, where do Presbyterians, how do we approach this? Where do we start?
Well, we could, of course, talk about this for a very long time. And as you said, there are going to be lots of opinions out there. So I'm going to try to stick to the denominational perspective, and then I'll add my own as appropriate. But yes, the psalm you referred to talks about God putting together, children in mothers' wombs, but the Bible doesn't say anything about abortion, and so that does leave it in terms of Christian ethics and how you approach different things, and of course it gets into politics as well. But Presbyterians have never been, we often hear, I'm against abortion or I'm pro-choice, as if those are the only two poles. And if you're pro-choice, the implication is that you're pro-abortion. And I think it's very important to say that the Presbyterian Church is not for abortion. We are, in fact, opposed to abortion, except under certain circumstances. And our official statements say, we regret the great number of abortions that we're having, and we want to work to reduce the number of abortions that take place. But the Presbyterian Church since 1970, before Roe versus Wade, which I believe was 1973, has said that this is an ethical choice, which is best made by the woman who is pregnant and not the state. So that's where you get the term pro-choice. It's not pro-abortion at all. It's siding with the fact that it's the woman who is pregnant who should be allowed in this country to make the choice. And so Presbyterians don't think that, we voted on these things. We don't think that abortion should be used for birth control. We don't think it should be used for gender selection, which we decry those kinds of things. We think the numbers should be reduced. But we think the ethical lines get very blurry when it comes to rape, incest, medical difficulties, or the economic hardship of the woman. There are other issues as well, but it gets extremely ethically complicated at that point. To us, there's not a clear right or wrong answer in those situations. And our goal as a church is to support the women who need to make those kinds of decisions for themselves and their child. We believe, or we voted again, that when these late-term abortions that we talk about, that once the child can actually live outside of the mother, we have stated that we think both lives should be saved in as much as possible. I don't think we have exact language about late-term abortions, but once the fetus is able to live on its own, we do support the life of the mother and the life of the child. And we do think adoption is a reasonable alternative. Should abortion be the only choice, we think adoption is a reasonable and fair and just other choice. So, it's not that, again, I'm going to stress, it's not that we're for abortion, and that would be a mischaracterization of our position, but the ethical choices and who gets to make them are less clear for us. We believe that Jesus Christ is the Lord of the conscience, and that the state, the church, the pastor are not lords of the conscience for the people who make those decisions. It's we're only accountable as individuals to God.
I love that you pointed out the verbiage used around this, of this pro-life versus pro-choice position, because it makes it so black and white, and this is such an issue that's completely opposite of that. I mean, talk about a gray issue area, because for whatever position anyone states, there's always a what about this? What about when this happens? I mentioned in our last episode I have a pretty Catholic view of life, which is true for me personally and ethically. And that surprises people based on how I vote sometimes because of that. But I very much agree with the Presbyterian thing of reducing abortion, of helping women to feel like this isn't the only choice, and providing alternatives for that, whether that's supporting other organizations, the church actively doing that through public policy of social welfare and encouraging bettering the foster care system, those kinds of things, because I just think it's so unbelievably complicated, and I think growing up I just assumed it was very simple, and it's just so far from it. So I really appreciate the Presbyterian position on that, and acknowledging the complications that come from it.
So again, you started with life. I think life is what we're talking about, and we value the life of the mother, and we value the life of the fetus, and how you balance those two. What happens when you have to make a choice between the mother's life and the child's life, and again, who gets to make that choice is a whole ethical dilemma.
Absolutely. I also think it's important to point out, because I don't know that everyone knows this, but particularly, so the data I looked at was from 2004 to 2016, that abortions every year have decreased dramatically. I mean, this is extreme dramatic decreases. And I don't necessarily have, I don't have the research to say why that is, but I do think there are things that have been proven to reduce the need for abortions. That is expanding education, contraception, helping poor people who need help and need food and need shelter, and encouraging more resources that way. So I think as Christians who, I'm speaking for all Christians, I shouldn't, but who follow this Presbyterian tradition of valuing life the way that we believe God does in the Bible and Jesus did in his time on earth, what do we do? I guess, what is our response? What's an appropriate response to this? Not telling us how to vote.
Well, I do think exercising your vote as an act of your Christian stewardship is an important thing. So I'm not telling people how to vote, but I do believe we should use our vote not as a selfish act, because that would be inconsistent with a Christian's calling for all of life to fall under, the lordship of Christ. But the church should be involved in counseling folks who are in difficult positions, and we have counseling ministries at Welsh, as you know. The pastors should be available for counseling under these conditions. There are, Roman Catholics oppose contraception type things, and Presbyterians do not, because we believe we should reduce the number of difficult or troubled or unwanted pregnancies. and I didn't know the numbers you just shared, but it sounds like contraception at some level is having a great impact. I don't know the total number, so I don't know if that's a great impact, but it certainly does sound positive.
2004, I think it was like 836,000, and then in 2016, 617,000. I'm getting those numbers slightly, they're not specific, but a pretty dramatic decrease.
Well, it's a tough topic, and I think being open and having this discussion, we've had lighthearted discussions and we've laughed a lot, and this is a more challenging one, but it's in the news, and I don't think it's something we should shy away or back away from. Again, the Presbyterian Church has had most of these beliefs at least since 1970, since people were deciding on these things. So what happened before 70 or before 73, is the subject of much hush-hush and quiet, and backroom and alley abortions, and that was a mess too, as I understand it.
I think it's great to hear the Presbyterian Church speak on it specifically, because there are other denominations that are incredibly outspoken on their position on abortion. And generally, it's been my experience that a lot of mainline Protestant churches focus a lot on social justice, which is an incredibly important part. I think we'll probably end up having a conversation about racism. That's something Welsher's talking about a lot, as well as food and education justice and all of these different sides of this. Welsher just became a Matthew 25 congregation, which we're going to talk to the church a lot more about too, but about working toward justice. But this is a social issue that we don't really talk a lot about publicly, has been my experience. So I think it's helpful as a Presbyterian to know what my denomination has said about it. Turns out I agree with it, which is always great too when you go to that church. But I think that it's such a healthy, we're in a world where it's really hard to talk about these issues without people getting really angry and uncomfortable, i.e. debate last night, that kind of thing. So I think this is healthy. I think this is a really great place to have these types of conversations too. Well,
right.
Would you like to add anything?
And again, Abby, we like to hear from people who watch this show. Is it a show?
It is, because remember, we're going for an Emmy, so it's a show now.
So please write us. We're certainly open to other opinions and further inquiries.
And we'd love to share them. I think kind of giving another shout out to different sections of what Welsher's doing. The Welsher blog is going to do some of these types of topics as well. Reverend Julia Finn is going to be writing about some of these and finding hope in really hard conversations. And we're kind of exploring where that's going to go. But I want to encourage all of our viewers and listeners, if you're a member of Welsher or not, that this is a safe place. This is a place to come explore these kinds of topics and learn about what the Bible's saying and find a community.
So let's go one step further before we sign off here. And Abby and I have discussed this, but the concept of being pro-life and I am pro-life, not in the jargon sense of the word, but I am for life. That the Bible is clearly for life. So it's only when you hook baggage onto that the term becomes controversial. I think we're all pro-life. That does get into the capital punishment kind of thing, and then the guns stuff. If we went even further, in terms of if you're going to be for life, you need to be for life, and if you're going to take an absolute stand against taking life, you need to take an absolute stand against taking life, and that's controversy also when it comes to the capital punishment and the death penalty and those kinds of things. And so I don't want to speak for the Roman Catholic Church, but their official teaching is pretty consistent about that they're anti-abortion, but they're also anti-capital punishment for the most part. And I think as Protestants, we need to know that those two things are kind of linked.
Very much so. Yeah.
Under the topic of being for life. And so if you're going to examine one ethical area of your life, I think you need to apply that to other ethical areas as well.
I think that's so insightful. And when I talk about but I hold a Catholic view of life. That's exactly what I mean, except I differ from them on the position of contraception. But I do hold that, I think it's just so important. When people look at very jargony pro-life, there's a lot of the pro-birth, that it feels very pro-birth as opposed to pro-life. And I think as Christians, we have to be very mindful of that God loves all of life, and that also can go into immigration and climate change and all of these different areas of how are we protecting and loving life the way God does. And I think that takes a lot of personal reflection to dive into.
Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Yeah. So this was a shorter conversation today. We did that on purpose because it's heavy. So we wanted to go shorter. I know, guys, we didn't want to say anything too offensive. But again, we do appreciate hearing from you all. Please leave comments, email us. We do happy to address your thoughts as well, or mention them on the show next time. And we're going to keep going into some of these and learning what the Presbyterian tradition and theological position is on a lot of these hard topics as we move toward a tumultuous season that we are about to enter in the next few weeks. So.
Abby, I did not say what my position was, but
You didn't. Would you like to?
Fully supportive of the Presbyterian position. I think it's well worth our support. That's
excellent. I like when you give your opinion, John. It's nice. It spices it up a little. That's just me. Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in, and we will see you or talk to you next time.
Thank you.